Okay, so I wanted to just record this conversation I'm having with Jay Nemesis, the most well-known popular investor on eToro. And we were talking about ethical investing, and we got onto the topic of morality and religion, and I just thought I would be cheeky here and start recording the conversation, with his permission, of course. So, do I have your permission, Jay?
Ooh, I'm not sure. Yeah, you do.
So the reason I started recording this, because it's basically been one of the most interesting discussions on worldviews I've had in a long time. So Jay was basically talking about how religions caused a lot of death and destruction more than certain other topics, and I agreed with him. And then he was saying how, like, in Europe, religion's declining, and as basically that's having a good effect according to his opinion. And so then I started talking to him about morality and how does morality arise from an atheist point of view, and what does that mean? Because as far as I'm concerned, if you're an atheist, then all that is around and exists is basically as a result of the laws of chemistry and physics, i.e. chemical reactions and things like that. So we've sort of been talking about that the last half an hour, and we're just going to keep talking about that. So we got on to quantum physics, and Jay was basically saying that free will results from quantum physics or something like that. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I'm no expert on it, but I guess that's my best theory. Either that or someone's built some random mechanics into the universe. Maybe that was God that did that. Maybe he just invented like a little dice roll every 5 seconds or something to make decisions more random.
So you had quite a large stream of thoughts there. You're talking about like free will. If we don't have free will, then God doesn't have the right to judge us. Is that correct?
Yeah. Basically.
So why is that?
Well, if you create something, right, which I think most religions believe that their God created them, or at least the thing that kind of turned into them. Honestly, it's kind of sadistic, ironically, to then judge the things that you've made for how good they are to your own standards when you made them. Like, really, if anything, it's like judging your own work, right? Like, if there's anything wrong with humans, and humans were built in God's image, at least in most religions kind of views, then he's kind of just judging himself in many ways.
It's a fair point.
So, you could argue that if anyone is failing that test, then it's just evidence that he has failed as a god. And if that's the case, why worship them?
Why should what?
If that's the case, why worship them?
It's a good point. Now, you're basing these, and I'll use the word moral thoughts, on your idea of what God should be like, right? So, this is what you call basically. There's no creator distinction. You're basically judging God the same way that you judge a fellow creation, right?
Yeah.
So could this if I create a drawing, can the drawing judge me on how I created the drawing?
If it's sentient, sure, why not?
Okay.
If you create a child, and then the child decides to judge you, how's that different to being a drawing if the drawing becomes sentient? I mean, I believe in equal rights generally, so as long as something is sentient, then I think for the most part they should have the same rights we do.
So basically, in a nutshell, simpling things down, you're saying that robots are not allowed to be judged by the creator.
If they can prove sentience, yeah.
What do you mean by that?
It's not so much that they're not allowed to be judged, right? But it's about the punishment side of it, and I guess the sort of superiority thing, right? Like, I think if a robot can demonstrate that that it has feelings and it has thoughts of its own, and it can feel pain and sense things in whatever way it does that. It could be like traditional, like seeing things or hearing things, or it could be something else. Then I think that deserves the same rights we have, and that we should not discriminate against them.
But should that robot be punished if it breaks the law?
Yeah, the same as humans should.
But why? If it doesn't have free will, which you're claiming humans don't.
Well, I'm not claiming that humans don't have free will. Right. I think humans do have free will. I just don't think that comes from God.
So why are we saying that we don't have free will at some point in the conversation?
I wasn't. I was saying that if we don't have free will,
right,
then it's unfair for God to judge us. If we do have free will, then I find it, kind of equally weird to judge people. Like, if we don't have free will, then there's nothing to judge, really, right? Because everything's pre-programmed.
Yeah,
like,
pretty much. Yeah.
It's predetermined. If we do have free will, he created us with that free will. So then judging us for making mistakes based on the free will he gave us seems like a very unfair thing to do. It's like if he was a programmer and he designed a program that worked perfectly in 99% of scenarios, but then made mistakes occasionally, and then he's like punishing the program. That's really weird. He should be punishing himself for making the program make mistakes.
Okay, but so are you saying that we shouldn't punish murderers here then?
No. I'm not saying that. Society chooses to punish murderers. Whether or not God punishes them, we don't know.
So you're saying that God doesn't have the right to punish murderers, but society does?
No, I'm saying God may well have the right to, but we don't know if he does or not. And so as society, we around the world have decided to make laws and things so that we can punish murderers, or, deter murderers, or deter crime, or bad behaviour, or whatever it is.
So going back to the start of our conversation, you're an atheist. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, there's a bit of uncertainty coming in.
Well, I would argue that you're an atheist to 99.999% the same level I am, right? And that you probably don't believe in all of the gods. You probably just believe in one of them.
Correct.
So you're atheist in regards to, all of the other gods that have existed historically and still do exist in many ways. Obviously, a lot of the gods now are based off the same god, but you don't believe in the Hindu gods, or the Greek gods, the Roman gods, the Norse gods.
That's correct. Yeah.
So what if our morality came from those gods and not your god? How do you know that your god is the one that made us? Maybe you're worshipping the wrong one, and actually maybe that means that you're going to fail judgment from the other gods because they have different rules.
It's a very valid point.
I just take it one step further and don't believe in any of them.
Okay. One step further. All right. Whether I believe in the correct God or not, we can get to that. But I'm going back to the start of this conversation again. You think society should punish murderers, but you see, you don't know whether God has the right to punish murderers or not. That's fine. So I'm going back to morality again. How does morality arise from just chemical reactions, which for me, it's like, from your worldview, we are basically just all a bunch of chemical reactions. Like, for me, it's hard to get morality from chemical reactions, and rather what you're saying is society. The reason that society punishes murderers is because of evolution. It's better for society, but it's not a moral thing.
So, I guess you're going to kind of break it down, right? Do you believe? I'm trying to think about the best way of kind of breaking this down. Do you believe that morality has shifted over time, or not?
No.
You don't. Okay.
Not from the idea. For me, morality comes from God, and God doesn't change. So you could ask the same question: does God change his mind about things like that?
Why did we write a New Testament and not just stick to the Old Testament in the Bible then?
So here we're going into a specific religion, which we can do if you want to.
Well, I'm assuming that that's probably the religion that you are, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I'm Christian, or follower of Jesus is what I usually prefer to say. But
yeah, but
or attempt to follow Jesus. I mean, I make mistakes like everybody else a lot of the time.
So do you think gay people are immoral and abominations?
No.
Because that's how the Bible describes them.
I don't believe that anybody is an abomination.
Okay.
Because the Bible says that everybody
pleased to hear it, by the way.
Pleased to hear it. Bible says that everybody is created in God's image, so and everybody will stand, according to my worldview, everybody, whether you're whatever preferences you have, will stand before God one day by yourself. And I don't know whether everybody's going to be watching it. I don't know whether everybody's going to see everything we've ever done in life before, like every 10 billion. I don't know.
I kind of hope so. I kind of hope that it's like a movie theatre and you and God are just like sitting down watching your own life, like with some popcorn, and being like, "Ooh, that was a bad decision." And he kind of like pushes you slightly towards the gates of hell, and then you make a good decision. He pushes you slightly back towards the gates of heaven.
Yeah, I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's no joke. According to our worldview, it's a judgment day. So when I look at somebody's life choices, I don't think I'm better than them, but because I know that I'm also going to have that moment where I will be on the judgment, right? So I don't think I'm better than anybody else, because if I have a higher standard of myself than somebody else, then in a sense it makes I'm up to a higher standard, right? So I just try and just live my life and hopefully, well, actually I'm promised salvation, so it's what the Christians call the Lamb's Book of Life. So so I don't think people are abominations. I feel that, like, there's basically different. The Bible talks about the commandments, and there's like different commandments, right? And if you break one commandment, it doesn't matter how many you've broken on the chain, it's still broken, right? So if you lie, if you steal, if you're bad to your parents, these are all commandments that are on the same level of what's not according to God's will, and anything else, like for marriage, or God's design for marriage.
But that's interesting though, because that means that in God's eyes, murdering people is as bad as being disrespectful to your parents.
Well,
what if you were
it's not really
disrespectful to your?
It's not really.
Like you're disrespectful to your parents because they're murderers.
It's not.
That's the reason you disrespect them.
It's not really as bad. It's just falling short of what God's standard is. So it doesn't matter really how far you fall. It's if you fall, and you fall. And hey, look, I didn't make the rules, and I didn't make the Bible. So, and for me, trying to say, what about this? What about that? It's not going to help you or the listener on Judgment Day, right? So what my decisions are is what is going to help people get past Judgment Day better. That's basically what I'm trying to do. And I guess then you could say, well, it's just your one God and 100 million gods. How do you know God's the correct? Well, that's another big question. But I basically, through my experience, have encountered the Christian God, and from my experience of all life, nothing tells me that this God doesn't exist, because I interact with this God. And so that's why I'm not worried about this question about like how do you know that everything else is not correct? Well, I wouldn't really worry about that question, because I would say, well, look, I interact with this God, and everything that happens, and it shows to me that this God is truthful about what he says. When I do things that he doesn't like, I feel like crap. When I do things that are laid out in the Bible and promised, then things are better for me. And this is like, I'm used to it. So it'd be interesting to have a Muslim or a Hindu or whatever share their experiences as well. I mean, that's the reason that I promote this God. But I mean, I'm not like one, you won't hear me preaching much on eToro about, I'm sure people will eToro will hear this now if we publish this. But it's a good conversation to have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything against people who are religious, but I do think that it's an inflexible system, right? People have their interpretations, which are largely pretty settled by now, because lots of people have written books about it, and society has kind of decided what they think everything means, for the most part, from religion. But society keeps changing, and we keep encountering new problems, and new things that we have to decide, is this moral or is this not moral? And that's why I've atheism, because it doesn't rely on anything that's legacy. It relies on democracy. It relies on society as a whole to decide what is good and what is bad, and what kind of proportionate punishment or rules should we have in place to try and stop bad things from happening and encourage good things to happen.
Well, how many democracies do you think exist on Earth, and have democracies always played out well?
No, they haven't always played out well. But I would say that the law of averages kind of shows that democracies tend to turn out better than for a longer period of time as well than kind of totalitarian systems or systems based purely on kind of long-standing traditions. Because if traditionally we believe in a world where you're not allowed to have computer systems, right, then that means that we never end up developing all sorts of vaccinations for different diseases, or treatments for illnesses, or technology that helps people with disabilities live their lives better, or things that help people move around and see their relatives more and connect to people more. Like, all of those things wouldn't exist. And I'm sure there's plenty of religions. I mean, there's religious communities today, like in the Amish communities and things like that, for example, that kind of boycott a lot of these sorts of things because they believe that that's not part of God's will.
Right, yeah. Now, I don't have a problem with medicine.
Generally, that improves society,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those are blessings. A lot of the health service in the UK was, I think, inspired by the church.
Yeah.
But in general, democracy basically means the will of the people.
Yeah. So
we can say sometimes in history where that was not beneficial. For example, the Red Soviet Revolution, there was a large percentage of the population supported that. There was a French Revolution. That was democracy in action, right?
I think the French Revolution was a good revolution. Generally.
Good for who? Exactly.
Good for the majority.
The majority.
The majority of people.
What about the majority of rich people?
It was bad for them.
So.
But then I don't think that greed is good. I think that greed is generally quite bad, especially when it is at the expense of other people, which is what it was and what it still is, really.
Have another joiner here. So the long haul, we are debating religion and recording it for maybe future publishing. So it's up to you if you want to join in this or not.
This turned into it turned into an impromptu podcast, I think.
Yes.
I was just playing this game and discussing the morality of oil in my Canadian utopia that I'm trying to build here.
And then Christian Nikos is trying to justify the oil industry or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So is that a mod for democracy, or is that?
No, this is Democracy 4.
4? Oh, okay. I've missed. They've launched a new one then.
Did you used to play that then?
3, yeah.
Yeah, I liked 3 a lot. I liked 3 a lot as well.
The problem with it is you just crank the dial all the way. You find a policy that you want and crank it all the way. And I think some of the results I would contest perhaps aren't quite as accurate as they should be. But it's an interesting game. I quite like it.
I don't know if you've ever looked at the developer, but his worldviews are reasonably obvious through his Twitter feed, I would say.
Okay, no, I haven't seen that. I don't know, some things he seems to come now quite nicely, others maybe a little bit less so, but I'm going to have to look this up now. So what have you concluded so far then?
So I don't think we've quite finished the discussion on free will or not. I think at some point Jay was complaining that God doesn't have the right to judge people because of free will. Is that correct?
I was complaining that he doesn't have the right to judge something to a standard that he's made when he made the things in the first place.
But what if he made it well enough that they would have real free will?
I mean, that's fine if you made it well enough that it has free will, but then it's really weird if you want it to fit to your standard and you give it free will. That in itself is cruel, right? Because you're giving something free will, but then saying you're not allowed to use it all in the way that you want to. You have to use it in the way that I want you to use it. Otherwise, I'm going to punish you to eternal pain and suffering and hell, right? It's kind of really weird to do that, right? Because by creating humans with free will, inevitably some of them will not live up to your rules. So you're guaranteeing that you're going to punish people and torture them for the rest of eternity.
Well, I agree that it was a risk by God on his decision to give free will. So certainly a risk.
I would argue that God's pretty stupid if he didn't think that anyone would go against that, like go against his standards, right? If you give people free will and there are enough people, then statistically you're going to get a really wide range of people's lives. Some people are going to become serial killers, some people are going to become like saviors of the world, some people will invent the atomic bomb, and then you judge them all to your own standard, knowing that basically you've kind of given them a roll of the dice, especially with the number of decisions that there are in life. I mean, it's arguable by some philosophers on if it's even possible to live a completely moral life.
Well, I would say it's impossible. Pretty much impossible.
Yeah. So, setting your standard, right? Like, if you set it at the very top, then it's impossible. And if you kind of slide it down a bit, then it becomes possible. But lots and lots and lots of people fail. And, he decides where to set that bar. And clearly that bar, based on what's written in the Bible, is set in a place where lots of people will fail it, and he's chosen that.
Well, what you're saying is correct if you don't look at all the mitigations for that. I would agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
Like what, though? I mean, yeah, that's just the way I see it. Is that I don't understand why you would why would you do that? It just seems very odd.
Okay, so basically you have to...
Unless it's some sort of an experiment and he doesn't really value us that highly.
So we have to go back to this thing again, what's called the creation-creator distinction. You're basically trying to logically play out God's decisions based on your understanding and knowledge, but humans have not been able to create other humans by their own science and technology, so we don't understand what it's like to create another human being.
It's kind of
and what everything's involved in that,
I mean, I kind of agree with you, but I kind of disagree with you, right? Like we've certainly done an awful lot of things in CRISPR technology and gene editing technology generally that helps us determine the kind of humans that we produce. And we've also done all sorts of things to make it easier for us to produce new humans, right? And I would also say that supposedly we're built in God's image, right? So maybe we just need enough time to become as powerful as God.
You made an excellent point there. That is the main point of morality and judgment, is that we have been made in God's image, and that is why we are then accountable for that, because the free will and consciousness that he's given us is...
Well, I would argue that also then proves that God himself is fallible.
Why?
Because we're fallible, and we were created in his image. As you said earlier, right? It's impossible to find a perfectly moral human being. It's impossible to find someone who does everything perfectly.
Yeah.
So you could also argue that actually maybe God made a very imperfect decision in making us, or in making his kind of rules of what is moral and what isn't moral. Maybe that was actually a mistake by him.
Or someone's made the error, but they've tried to wrap it up in the Bible.
Yeah.
The interpretation of what God's will was. That's assuming we start from the same point and are all taking it for granted that God is real in the, I imagine, Judeo-Christian sense here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've got into the differences, between...
Yeah, I did talk... Yeah, I did kind of touch on it a little bit, but in mainly through the lens of, that I think realistically most people are atheist. They're just not as atheist as I am, right? Because I've eliminated the Norse gods, and I've eliminated the various different forms of other kind of derivations of Jesus and of the kind of like that entire tree of gods and the gods from Egypt and the Mayan gods, and all of the different gods that descended from those, of which there are many. It's like a big tree of gods that have kind of
as I have
time. But I eliminated all of them, and some people haven't. They still have one left.
Yeah, like me.
They believe it.
Like me. Yeah, so basically the complaint is that God made imperfect beings in a sense. God didn't make robots is also the argument. You're complaining that God didn't make humans a robots.
Either that, or I'm complaining that he's made arbitrary rules for us to abide by that he knows that we can never fully abide by.
If it's not possible for a human being to disobey God, then basically you've made a robot.
Maybe that's what he was trying to do.
So that's the complaint, in a sense, that God doesn't have a right to judge you because you're not a robot.
Yes.
So would you like God to take away your free will and make you a robot?
I mean, I wouldn't complain that much. I think it would be quite nice to be a robot. I mean, it's either that or he takes away the tests and the judgment.
the thing is, the trouble, if you take away the judgment, is that there is a lot of injustice in life that's not punished. Think about all the rapists and the murderers and whatever that don't get found out by the courts. And people say that's not fair.
It's not fair, and that's exactly why we need that motive, and to know that there isn't a God that's going to fix it for us, and that we need to do better at seeking out those injustices and making them just.
But then again, if you have that atheist worldview, then ultimately it doesn't matter if, quotes, crimes are punished or not, because ultimately they are just chemical reactions. And it's a form of evolution to punish the wicked, not because it's moral, because it just benefits society, which is, in a sense, a chemical reaction of evolution to promote the growth of the gene pool. Nothing moral about punishing murderers.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, you could be correct. You could be correct.
So the debate about it is in a sense arbitrary. Even our thought processes is just ultimately meaningless, arbitrary chemical reactions.
I think it's pretty clear that people have got consciousness and they're able to make their own decisions. Whether you attribute that to Creator or whether you attribute it to the great game of cosmic roulette and things coming together to kick it off is a different point. But I think it's quite clear people have got a conscience. But I don't think that people need a God figure to have some level of moral behaviour. There's plenty of people who don't believe in God that have got a set of morals and standards of behaviour that most people would look at and say that's a pretty good way to live. And I think historically, a God figure has been used to kind of get compliance through fear from really people who are looking for power. I don't think you can directly attribute moral behaviour and having morals to some deity. And ultimately, if we say what our source material is the Bible, I mean, that's massively flawed in the first place. Even if you accept fully the premise that there is a God and all of the things that go along with that, it's still got to have been translated through humans who are by nature very fallible. And it's been translated how many times over the years? Look at the way language has changed. I mean, you've only got to go back, is it about 500-600 years? If you ignore the fact that if you went back in time, you'd not be where the Earth is now because of the movement around the galaxy and all of that US stuff. But if you went back about 500 or 600 years, you would start to struggle to communicate with most of the population. You may be able to kind of speak some semblance of modern English and kind of get by with the kind of very wealthy, the very well-spoken, well-educated people who've got more of the Latin roots. So, you've got to quadruple that amount of time to go back to the time when Christ has apparently lived, and how many people with their fallibility have kind of started to translate and impose some of their ideas and their beliefs into this religious text that we look at now and hold up as the gold standard of what God wants. I mean, I don't really subscribe to that view, but even if I did, it kind of makes me think, well, surely that would make us a little arrogant to be able to look at this and say we know what God meant. I don't know, something just... So if we agree that deity existed and started the world in the way that the creation tale is told, why would we, certainly at this point in our evolution, even have a chance of understanding the mind of a God figure?
Wow. So many points are brought up there, Vuruk. You started off with the word good, which is interesting. We moved on to the Bible and translations, which I think you've got a misconception about the Bible. But let me just go with the word good for a minute. When you say good, that in a sense requires a moral, unchanging God to define what that good is. Otherwise, anything can be defined as good based on the situation, right? And regarding the Bible and translations, people a lot of times think the translations is like Chinese whisperers, right? It's nothing like that. When they go to make a new translation of the Bible, they go to the original documents or the copies of the original documents which are digitized, which are actually the Nestle Greek and the Textus Receptus are one of the most common Greek manuscripts. And then they have the Hebrew ones for the Old Testament. Now, when they make a new translation of the Bible, this is what I don't like, there are copyright laws, which means that new translations have to have intentional changes in the language so that they don't intersect with other translations up to, I think, something like 30%. So there are intentional differences that are made, but the meaning is still the same, but you can word the English words a different way so that it's not clashing with visiting copyright. But that isn't God's fault. That's copyright law's fault, right?
Well, I'm not saying that's God's fault. I'm saying that wherever you put humans with their fallibility into a process, you're going to have error creeping in one form or another.
The biblical documents and manuscripts are probably the most well intersecting historical documents of all time, better than other things like Plato and Aristotle. Much more documents, and we still have them as canon. There's no mistakes in Plato's and Aristotle, but apparently the biblical ones, there's much more documents. So we should be having a greater respect for the Bible than the Plato's Iliad or something like that. But in regards to the word good, that is also like risky for an atheist. I presume, are you an atheist, Vidic?
I'm not sure I'd say I'm an atheist.
Right.
I don't think I'd go quite that far. I definitely don't believe in the story as told of Jesus Christ in its form, or, to be honest, the creation story. I don't buy that at all. I think I do believe there's something greater than ourselves, and I think it'd be a little bit naive to look out to the wider universe that's, greater than our comprehension, on a scale that just goes beyond anything that we can even kind of fit in mind in any way, shape or form, and, to think there's not something else out there. But I think, I don't know, I think the Bible's possibly let's say it's all in good faith and not go down the way that religion's been misused over the years, and I think it has. But setting that aside,
of course it has. It still is misused a lot.
Yeah, but without going down that kind of fork in the road. Yeah, I'm not sure that humans who've been the kind of the source of all of this knowledge and all of these documents that have become the Bible, I'm saying that humans are fallible, and it's probably, I'd go perhaps as far as to say arrogant to think that they can know the mind and the will of God.
Okay, good. So you're open to there being forces that would be behind consciousness and morality, so that it's easier for you to accept something's moral than, for example, a hard atheist. I think hard atheism version of morality is ultimately, it doesn't have anything ultimately backing up it's what it is. It's basically evolution and the benefit of the gene pool to have punishment for crimes and things like that.
Yeah, I think, societies can start to decide what is moral behaviour and what isn't. And if you look at the difference in the attitudes towards life and death and suicide between a Christian view and the Buddhist worldview that was going on in, say, feudal Japan. I'm not going to be the arbiter of saying one of those is right and one of them is wrong. I think it's really for a society to kind of come to a conclusion in their own way about what moral behaviour is. And I would note that I can't think of anywhere where murder is not condemned by people, whether they are, whether they're religious or otherwise, or whichever religion they choose to follow. And I think this point on the argument of good and moral, if we take the example of, say, Alan Turing, he's kind of widely regarded as a good figure from history. He did some very important work, and his story's seen as tragic. If he were to be judged by society these days, I think most people would look at him as a person and his sexuality and be quite tolerant and have no kind of condemning view for him. But if you start judging him by the standards of 1950s Britain, when you had the sodomy laws, the moral view was very, very different. I would say we've got it right now, in the fact that we're tolerant of people. We don't judge people by their sexuality, and we don't take a moral judgment on what people do behind closed doors that isn't harming anyone else. I think that's quite a good view to have. But that certainly wasn't a common view in 1950s Britain. I mean, we're talking less than a century ago. So I think that some things, some kind of moral standards endure over time and across different parts of the world, across different cultures. But I think we walk a bit of a dangerous path when we start looking to the Bible, because I think there are things, people use the Bible to talk about how gay people shouldn't have a right to exist and they're committing mortal sins. And I just don't buy into that intolerance. So I think societies can come together and actually look at what moral behaviour is. I don't think we need a text from a couple of thousand years ago to kind of teach us innately right from wrong.
I would agree with that.
Fair enough. I mean, so you need a standard to not change in order for any morality or, in a sense, religion to stand up. Otherwise, you just have chaos. Would you agree?
No.
You can't have absolute morality unless there's something fixed in the universe. Or it's chemical reaction. Either there is absolute morality or there isn't, in which case everything's just chemical reactions. Would you agree?
I would probably agree with that, but I would also say that it's probably impossible for us to ever know what absolute morality is. I think it's possible that morality doesn't exist if you subscribe to the belief that free will doesn't exist, and that we are in. Let's say every decision we make spawns an alternate universe where we took the opposite decision, for example. So let's say every single possible permutation of the world and of our lives has played out simultaneously. Then you could argue that morality doesn't really exist because, well, even then, I mean, you could still possibly argue that it does exist, to be honest, and that some of those universes turned into moral ones and some of them less so. But it's if there's no choice involved, then does it make something immoral just if there's no choice involved? I don't know.
Well, we can put this down as a thought experiment. Let's say you are a human being with free will, and nobody doubts that you have free will, okay?
Yep.
So if I have a time machine that can tell the future, do you still have free will? Does having a time machine destroy your free will?
No.
Then
I mean,
why?
First of all, you can choose if you want to use it or not. So.
No, I'm not talking about you. You're Jay, and long haul invents a time machine, and he can see the future. Does his inventing the time machine destroy your free will?
It depends what fictional model of time travel you...
Yeah, exactly. It does, and it depends if he uses it or not.
You've got the grandfather paradox, which is the classic.
Exactly.
But of course, if you subscribe to some of the more recent interpretations that have been put into certain films, other films are available. But some of them take the view that if you were to go back in time and kill your grandfather, you've spawned an alternate universe, and you're carrying on from that point. And depends if you subscribe to the many worlds theory or
not.
Not, yeah. So I think it's a tricky area because you're getting into so many kind of hypotheticals, and without really being kind of very locked into the physics side of that. And a lot of that isn't fixed either. There's a lot of ideas about the many worlds theory, for one. I'm not sure I can see the value in trying to go through that thought experiment. I mean, I think it might be an interesting idea to pursue, but I don't think we can possibly deduce any valid truths from that experiment.
So sometimes there's basically, that's one complaint that I've had, is that because God knows the future, then we don't have free will. But that's the counter argument, is that if Rurik invents a time machine, does it destroy free will? And then we have proven that free will can exist, even though God can know the future, right? So sometimes people will say, God knows that you will end up destroyed, therefore you never had a chance. But I would disagree with that. Even you can have somebody with free will, but and sometimes there was a great Christian writer called Charles Finney, and he talked quite a lot about this, about judgment and God knowing the future. And he says that if God knows that you will rebel against him and just not believe in him, he will do whatever he can to then try and change your mind, and that even still people decide that not to believe, then there's in a sense nothing more that can be done. So it's for me, when you say is this certain people an abomination, I would say no, because from my worldview, the Bible, it says that God wants nobody to perish. So no human can really say ultimately if another person's going to hell or not, because nobody really knows. We'll only know one day. What's that?
I said a lot of people try.
Try what?
To say they know God's will and that you should be condemned to hell, not you individually, but you as in other. Othering groups is quite a favourite of certain religious groups. But
I think if people say that, then I don't really want to sound arrogant here, but they are not as close to God as they might believe that they are, because
I'd agree with you.
What's that?
I'd agree with you.
Because when C.S. Lewis once said that, Aslan in the Chronicles of Narnia. You read the book? Have you watched the Chronicles of Narnia?
I've read the books probably about 35 years ago, if not more.
What was the name of the girl? Was it Louise or something, or Lucy? Lucy says to Aslan, and everybody loves Aslan. She says, Aslan, how is it when I get closer to you, you seem bigger? In the same way as my experience is, the closer, I'm not claiming to be close to God, any more than anybody else, but I just find the closer I get to God is the more humble I am of my own worth and goodness, because when even the disciples, as written in the New Testament, when they were with Jesus, and he would several times their experience was when Jesus did a miracle or whatever it was, they would actually, the disciples, like whom the church was built on, would bow down and say, depart from me, go away, Jesus, because I'm sinful, right? So it's very dangerous ground for anybody to say you're going to hell, because you're going to stand before God one day as well. And so it's scary, It says the Bible is also fearing God, all about fearing God. It's not all just love and dovey and everything. Fearing God is a big deal. The Bible says, don't fear those that can kill the body. Fear him who can throw the body and soul in hell.
Part of why I don't like religion.
What's that?
It's part of why I don't like religion. I don't think people should live their lives partially through fear and make decisions in their life partially through fear. I think it leads to what we could argue quite easily to be bad decisions. How many people, to bring up the same example again, I know that you don't feel this way, but a lot of religious people do, and the Bible does say some pretty controversial things about it. How many people are born gay and then live up their entire lives fearful that they're going to go to hell, and repress those feelings and repress their true personality and their true identity and hide it. Especially ironic, really, since theoretically God would be able to see straight through that anyway. Maybe God would take pity on them for not carrying out the act, but supposedly God would still know that they're gay, right? So,
well, I think people still have a choice, and they'll have to answer to God to that one day, and whether they lived according to what their conscience told them was right or not,
But it's not just their own conscience, is it? Because inevitably, and here's one of my criticisms of religion, is there are those who use religion to condemn other people for the way they're living their life.
Yeah.
So God's will isn't even coming into it in that point yet. But at that point, because you've got someone who innately feels a certain way, they're being told by some people around them that that's a problem and it's wrong, and they're going to be judged for it, and they're potentially going to go to hell for it and whatever else.
Well, I've worked with gay people. I've worked with transgender people before, quite closely on projects. I never told them that. I never condemned them like that. I would find it like. I don't treat people differently, really. I have my friends, of course, friendly with, but I don't really treat, and as colleagues, differently based on the worldview. But basically, I try and point people towards Jesus and God, and He's the one that's ultimately going to judge them or not, whether whatever decisions they make, or whatever I make,
How do you factor in other religions then into your view of God?
Oh yeah, no problem at all. So I'm an attempt 99.99% atheist thing. So yeah, it's I consider myself blessed and lucky that I was born into a country where I was taught the Bible and Christianity. My mum was very religious. I consider that a great privilege, because a lot of people don't have that, and I believe that what I follow is true based on my experience in life. But, so, you're basically saying, what was the question again?
Well, how does your belief in God factor in with the other religions that exist? I mean, have all those people got it wrong?
How does it factor in? What do you mean by that?
Well, what makes you think you've got the right one if there are other religions with a different view of what God is?
That's a very hard question to do over the internet. Because I can't really prove anything to help you see that. But if we think about it logically first, then I'll try and answer that question. I don't want to be a dodger. If God exists, right? Do you think that He would be logically consistent within Himself? Okay, let me say this. Do you think that the being that created the universe and the cell
I
and the
don't
genome...
necessarily think there's a being that created the universe, but sorry, go on.
If there was a being that is powerful enough to create the cell and the genome and the amazing human body and the fine balancing of the sun and the moon and the earth and the solar system and the laws of physics and the chemical constants, do you think that being is consistent in himself to know who he is?
You would like to think so, but I don't think that could be taken as a given.
Do you think? Yeah. Let's just say there was two religions, and let's not say 10,000 religions. Do you think that God would be able to have two religions be compatible with each other that are contradictory? Do you think it's possible for two mutually exclusive things to exist?
Is that a logical fallacy, two mutually exclusive things?
Yeah, of course. It's like saying this thing is 3 and 4 at the same time, or this thing is black and also white, or
Well, God did create quantum mechanics, I guess, so maybe. I think they could exist at the same time.
Okay, well, if something's mutually exclusive, it means that they can't overlap in the set of all possibilities. There's no overlap. Or there's enough non-overlap that they would be logically inconsistent.
But I guess what's the point you're trying to make?
So, is it possible for two religions that are mutually exclusive to both exist and be true at the same time?
You're saying some religions are wrong.
Well, they would be wrong if they didn't match up to the God. So there can only really be one truth. And if that truth is summed up in religion A, then religion B, if it's mutually exclusive logically to who God is, then it would be wrong, correct?
If you know what the truth is, then yeah, you can say A is right, B is wrong. But if there's no objective way of telling which one is right, they could all equally be wrong and nobody knows the truth. You just go into a circular argument with yourself.
But would you agree there can only really be one true religion that's accurate representation of God exists if A and B religion are mutually exclusive logically?
I'd say that
It depends on the sort of God you have in mind, right? If you have in mind a God who wants to be served and he has one set of rules for everybody to follow, then yes, all the right ones would have to be the same. So if they differ along any dimensions, one has to be wrong. But you could dream up different kinds of gods, right? Why is it impossible for there to be a God who decides he wants to be worshipped two exclusive ways by two different groups? As long as we don't know who the God is, we can make up very different cases.
The God could well be a troll that decides to tell all of the people who grow up in Southern America that his name is this and he believes that they must make sacrifices to him, and could tell the Europeans something else and people in Southeast Asia or something a third thing.
He could troll, yes, if he wanted to.
Yeah.
What does that say about the morals of the person setting the moral compass by which everyone's supposed to live?
I would say I'd have more respect for them, to be honest. I think that's hilarious. Imagine if that was actually true. We all die and we just find out that it's like, no, actually, I'm not even actually really a god, to be honest. Lol, I just happened to be here and observing, and I had some influence. I didn't even make you guys. I just somehow ended up in control enough to make you believe certain things. That would be hilarious. I would find it funny. I mean, tragic, but also funny.
Maybe that's the test he set for us, to see through it and reject it.
Maybe.
Come together as a species.
Maybe.
Don't accept the divisions that are put in front of you.
Modern Satanism dictates that you are actually God yourself, and that each person is their own God, and it's about discovering that fact, that everything else isn't necessarily what it seems, and that ultimately you are your own moral compass and you make your own decisions and try and just be a good person.
Then we get back to this word called good again. We don't actually know what good is ultimately, if there isn't a God.
It's just like every other word. It's defined by society. God didn't invent language, in my opinion. Language shifts over time. Gay used to mean happy, and words evolve in their spelling. I mean, even since mobile phones came along, one of my favorite examples is the word book. Used to come up when you were using early mobile phones in like text speak, and you tried to write the word cool, it would first come up with the word book. And so for about 5 or 6 years, in those early years of mobile phones, teenagers replaced the word cool with book because it was more efficient. And so book started meaning cool, which is hilarious. These things happen all the time. Language evolves based on society's kind of somewhat swaying kind of definitions of it as time passes.
So the word good is very interesting. I'll keep coming back to that because the word good in China means mass surveillance, and or at least in CCP, the word good in Russia means bombing Ukrainians, and the word good in you get the point. In North Korea, or maybe not North Korea because everybody hates what's going on there, but the French Revolution, the word good to some people means hanging people.
Yep.
I don't think you can necessarily ascribe the word good to that. I don't think you can just describe something that's fairly objectively bad being described as good. I think people justify all kinds of actions to themselves or to their populations because it serves their purpose.
Well, language is basically subjective. I mean, and the usage of the word good is always going to be based on someone's opinion anyway, pretty much.
Let me guess the topic.
Sorry, Files X.
No, guess.
You were talking about the definition of good?
We're recording a podcast, so if you don't want to say anything that you don't want to be public, then I'll just give you a heads up. But on you go.
Oh, well, we are live?
Yes, we're live, but
we're live. We're live on
the Nikos
CNBC
show.
Right now.
Wait. That's the good chance to have the debate with Jay about anything, basically.
Well, we're debating the existence of God and morality because we started talking about oil.
All right.
This is where this all started. It all started from me doing a policy in this game. That's what happened.
Yes.
What the hell is this?
I saw that I was subsidising oil as Canada, and I thought, wow, that's got to go. And then ever since then, we've been debating morality and religion. And if morality stems from religion, or if morality is possible without religion.
Me and Jay were talking for about half an hour before I decided, hey, we should record this. This is interesting. And then we'll decide what to do with it, whether or not.
Okay.
So what were we talking about again? What were we talking about? What was the last thing we were talking about? No, Files X was saying something.
Me? Was I?
Do you think we have free will?
You do say quite a few things, so it's possible.
Okay. Well, actually, is this a game?
Oh, what I'm playing, yeah.
Jay's playing a game where we're debating
I'm trying to eradicate religion subtly and see if anyone notices.
The last thing we were talking about was Varric was asking me how do I know that my God is correct and everybody else is wrong, basically.
Oh, you don't know. You can just guess.
So what the point I'm making is that, okay, that's a fair question and a valid question and an important question, because how do people find the real God, right? And Jay was saying that if God is trolling us by having multiple correct religions, then that would be funny, but ultimately it's not a fair thing.
It would be funny. See, Falzik laughed.
So, well, I mean, that's one of the theories, like that is like almighty, but in the end, it just wants to have some fun. So he just he's playing the games like Jay's playing this game.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did the thing start from that? Like because
the question is God moral? Is God himself moral?
Yeah.
By our standards. If we were to judge God with our own standards, whether they be derived from him or not, is he moral?
Yeah, I get it.
I don't think there's much of a case for killing all the firstborn sons as being a moral action.
And how is all of this going to help our profits this year?
So if we get the right answer, he's going to grant our wish.
Okay,
You're being hate.
Well, my wish is that the stock market crashes, so you hope I don't get that wish.
I don't really think God cares about our portfolios too much.
Well, honestly, I really want everything to crash.
To be honest, I think we've probably taken this conversation as far as it's realistically going to go now. Anyway, It's starting to go in circles. So.
Yeah, I think I'll end the podcast there, and then we'll decide whether or not we'll release it. If you somehow are listening to this podcast, then we have agreed to publish it. If you're not hearing it, then you will not hear it. Okay, thank you very much. Bye bye.
If you're not hearing it, then you won't hear it.
At least God will know it happened.
The perfect disclaimer.